Good morning and welcome back to Let's Write Adventure, where we literally write a D&D adventure, although these techniques could be used for any tabletop role-playing game, TTRPG, if you will. And so here we're going to work our way through the adventure that we started previously, um, centering around our glacial mine and our MacGuffin, the cold iron held within. Um, and so let me go ahead and share our screen here. Yeah, so the adventure that we're working on, if you haven't joined us previously, is the characters are hired by a community leader of some kind, who will be named later, to recover the only known deposit of cold iron ore lost in Glacial Mine. Once ravaged by disease, the community later needs it to save them. The community rather needs it to save themselves from the foretold coming of the now named Bloodgood Sisters, Coven of Hags. And led to believe the village plans to fight the powerful Fae, they recover the cold iron. But when they return, they learn that the village intends to use the cold iron to pay off the coven and thus complete their ancient pact. The party must then decide whether to support empowering the coven with this most powerful Fae slaying cold iron, or convince the community to fight back, knowing that there's going to be consequences either way. All right, so where we left off last time is we were just starting to plot out our adventure structure here, having already spent some time working on the basics of our villains, the Bloodgood Sisters here. Um, and so we'll jump back into working on this in a moment here. First, I wanted to say that I take great pains to not work on this when we're not on stream, because one thing that I do not want to happen is have present to you a demonstration that is: step 1, write the name of your adventure; step 2, a miracle happens; step 3, play your adventure. Like, that's useless. I want you to see this work in real time. Now, that being said, inspiration comes when inspiration comes, and frequently that is in places where you're not actively thinking about your creative piece or your adventure. It'll crop up in places when you are doing rote activities, going for a walk, working out at the gym, cleaning up the house. Agatha Christie said the best time to plot a novel was when you were doing the dishes. And a lot of writers and creatives fall into that category. It's because while your body is engaged in these sorts of mundane activities, your subconscious has time to kind of free flow and bring ideas to the surface. And it was on one such occasion, when I was walking back from checking the mail in my apartment complex, that a thought occurred to me. So, our campaign takes place in and around a glacial mine. And so the initial impression on that would be glacier up north in lands cold and frozen. But frankly, that didn't, well, it felt flat to me. There was nothing surprising about that. It's suspected. And while there's nothing wrong with doing that, so if you are playing a campaign that takes place in a frozen tundra, or up north, or in some other place where it's bitter cold. I'm running a campaign right now for some of my friends where the Feywild Summer Court has been overtaken by winter. So there's nothing wrong with tossing in winter-themed elements where they fit. But I thought for this, I'd really like to do something a little surprising. And so where would there not be a glacier? Well, there would not be a glacier in any sort of desert or warm climate. Um, and so the idea of having this glacier exist on top of a font of magic, if you will, or having been formed from a font of magic, out in the middle of a desert or a wasteland. And so you're, in a hot, uncomfortable climate, trekking through this unrelenting, sweat-inducing wilderness, and there, jutting up out of the wilds, is this chunk of ice, like a jagged block of glass, like an iceberg, out of in a place where it shouldn't be. I think is kind of a cool thing for players to experience. Um, it throws back to if you ever watched Lost when they find the Black Rock and it's the well, spoilers. It's the galleon that's just been dropped in the middle of the jungle. Like little things like that you can do in fantasy adventures like this, and they're fun. They're surprising, and they reinforce to your players that anything could happen. They can't lean back on the mechanics of our, you know, mortal world to as a standby for what might happen in this world. They have to engage with fantasy in a fantastical way. And so I think that that would be fun for this. I go back and forth whether or not it should be a desert or whether it should a um, uh, take place in another wasteland of some kind. I briefly considered a jungle, but that feels a little too Mosquito Coast to me. If you're familiar with that movie or that book, um, and so yeah, so wasteland of some kind, I think, is a cool place to set that. And the reason that I bring that up here and now is not because we should necessarily have to spend time detailing out that wilderness, but it affects um, sort of our mindset as we're talking about this glacial mine. And so, one thing I would encourage you as you're working through this process on your own is to um, to embrace those moments of creativity when they pop up. When you're stuck on something, there are two tactics that you can take. You know, writer's block is an indication there's something that you don't yet understand about your world. And you can either sit down and free write or journal about it. And that's frequently what I'll do as an active process of kind of working through that. And I'll find as I talk to myself about that on the page, solutions will present themselves. Um, or two, you can get up and go for a walk, go do the dishes if you want to channel your inner Agatha Christie, um, or what have you. Just something where you're get out of your that physical writing space, do something rote, do something that you don't have to think really hard about, and let your mind play because creativity, these ideas will come to you in those moments when your brain is playing. Okay, so let's go ahead and pick back up with our glacial mine here. Um, and so we've been kind of jotting down some features, and we note that this is extreme cold. Um, I think I do want to detail some of get some rough information on the wilderness around this to start before we get too far along and we lose that idea. So let's kind of jump to the side here and let's say we'll call it wasteland wilderness for the moment. We'll come up with a cooler name for that later. Um, all right, so let's mark that as wilderness and let us open that up real fast. We'll use our wilderness template here and just let that populate. Now, we don't necessarily have a lot of information here yet. We don't necessarily need a lot of information here yet. Um, this is set up, by the way, so that if you wanted to say build your dungeon in one of these location tabs, you could absolutely do that with your key locations, your point of interest, as we'll see. Obviously, choosing not to do that in this particular adventure, and that's I'll go back and forth. It's just whatever makes sense to me at the moment. So we're not going to spend a lot of time worrying about filling this out right here. Instead, I'm just going to add kind of a quick note to myself and say hot, maybe, and put that in. And I mention that here because it doesn't necessarily play a huge factor in writing our bit about the glacial mine. But if we keep in mind that the surrounding environment is perhaps hot, like if you could imagine going, your players walking through a desert, right? The sun is beating down and they're sweating. and they've stripped down to just their bare bones so that they're not, you know, not gonna die of heat exhaustion out in the wastes. And then they step into this mine, and it's suddenly bitter cold. One that creates a very sharp distinction too, but it also um, creates some inherent challenges for the players, right? Because they need to plan before they head out on how to deal with that extreme heat, as well as how to handle that extreme cold. It forces them to shift mindsets and modalities and think a couple steps ahead, which is always fun. Adding little challenges like that into your adventures is a cool way to, one, add a sense of atmosphere and mood, but also two, add little speed bumps for them, add um, little complications that don't involve you just tossing monsters and traps and things like that at them. Um, the more you can do narratively, the more organic things in your adventure will feel. All right. So anyway, I've done enough pontificating. Let's get into the details here. So, yes, we started doing the general features here from last time. We talked a little bit about the lighting here. This takes on a new context if we're not in, a steel gray skied northern, ice field, but if we're in in an open expanse beneath the beating sun, that adds a lot more light to this, which can be very cool to play with as well. Um, the atmosphere, let's say the air is cool and crisp, almost sterile smelling. I don't know about the rest of you, but if you spend time in very cold weather, that air always smells almost, well, like just sterile, like not stagnant, but just like sharply empty to me, as odors um, are less pronounced in cold weather. And so we might put that in here. We'll see what we do with that. All right, so let's see what else, other kind of features we want to be kind of generally pervade this environment. We've talked a little bit about plague and infection. Um, we'll have to figure out a disease to put in there, and let's make a note on that though, because I kind of like the idea of it not being. Um, it's not like you walk into the mine and now we got to make rolls every hour, see what you contract this disease. That gets ponderous, and it gets repetitive, and it doesn't feel good narratively. Um, so, we could put some other kind of vector in here. If we were traipsing through a swamp, I might say something like, if you don't boil or use magical means to purify the water, maybe you might get a disease if you drink it, because you've got to drink a gallon of water a day as an adventurer, and frankly, probably as a human in most of our cases. Although please don't take medical advice from me. I'm not a doctor, and I don't even play one on TV. So, or we might say, hey, if you spend time in a mosquito area, you got to roll so often to see if you catch the infection, that kind of deal. But here, I like, since we have this idea that this place is sitting on top of a font of magic, and that's what's created this unusual, exotic environment, that perhaps there is a gaseous quality to this. I could see kind of a chlorine green gas in places that act as natural barriers, deterring adventurers from taking certain paths, not blocking them outright, because they could still cut through that that gas and risk it. But it gives us some cool little levels to play with here. So let's stick with that. Let's go with that to start, in lieu of other ideas. Feel free, if you watch this live, to toss in some ideas in the chat if what I'm saying sparks some creativity in you. I love that kind of input. Okay, so let's say patches. Instead of making this all full sentences, let's just kind of let's go a little shorter with some bullet points here. Patches of chlorine green gas, um, chlorine green gas, infectious if inhaled. And we'll say disease TBD. Cool. We'll come to that. We'll figure out the mechanics of that later. We'll either take something for the DM's guide, or we'll reskin something, or we'll invent something all our own. If you're looking for diseases, DM's guide's got 3 of them in there. And then there's also a couple in Tomb of Annihilation, which are fun to toss in to adventures. They did some cool stuff with those. Okay, so we've kind of got that here. We should probably put something in here about this being a font of magic, because that's got to play a role in here somehow. You don't stand on, a living pillar of magic and it not do some tricky things to you, even if it's just some, low scale ASMR or something. All right, so let's see here. Font of magic. That also explains. Ooh, that's not header 1. We want the header 2. All right. Font of magic. The wow, glacial mine. There we go. The glacial mine is the result of a font of magic intersecting with the material plane has caused the creation of a sustained glacier. How do you actually spell glacier? Thank you. Okay, glacier in the middle of a sweltering waste land. Cool. Consequently, this magical interaction also has. We're getting a little low here, so tell you what, let's move me to the side for a moment so you can see what I'm writing. Whee! All right. Consequently, this magical interaction has cross reaction is the word I'm looking for. There are reactions with other kinds of magic. And so we'll say magical reactions TBD. And we'll come back to that. We may do something that's a little like wild magic-y here later on. There is an urge when you're doing this to be aware of that. You may find that you have a tendency to try to come up with a mechanic for this and a rule for that, and there's nothing wrong with developing your own mechanics. In fact, it's one of the great things about this game is that you can do that. Just bear in mind that mechanics are not what makes your story interesting, or not what makes this adventure interesting. It's the story, and also that the more mechanics you pack into an adventure that you write, the more cumbersome it is going to be for you to run. Because while yes, you will remember many pieces of this, you're going to have to refresh your memory in the steps. You're going to have to move through all those steps, and so I'm a big proponent of keeping things as light mechanically as you can. Which is not to say hand wave things or ignore mechanics that would actually improve or affect the outcome of your narrative in your adventure. Just saying, use them Use them sparingly, use them lightly, and use them judiciously. I can't speak today. Um, use them where you need them. All right, cool. All right, so we'll come back to that. Don't want to do anything too wild with that because you don't want spellcasters to mutiny. Okay, so with that in mind, let's. I think it's enough of kind of our general features. Let's start talking about what actually exists in this place. And so, when we're conceptualizing a wasteland, giant, glacial mine jutting up out of the middle of nowhere, home to a incredibly important resource, this cold iron, um, means that this place also probably needed defenses as well. And we could do a thing where we say, oh, the elves or the Eladrin or what have you that previously constructed this place, built a fortress around it, walls around it, maybe living palisades, trees that feed off the magic, and so little patches of green here. We could do that. I don't, I don't like how it feels. It feels a little like a hat on a hat. I kind of like the idea of making this like the elvish version of a dwarven fortress because we always think about dwarven fortresses and their mines are kind of like one and the same, right? Like the fortress is built and then there's the mines that extend below it and out from it. um, and if you've going to be digging into a giant indestructible glacier anyway, um, you might build your defenses into that too. So I bring that up because as we kind of go through figuring out the key locations here, which is what we're working on right now, um, we don't need to include every element of a fortress and every element of a mine, but um, the more realism that you put into those, we'll say, um, the more real they will feel to your players. So you don't need to go do a deep dive on all the pieces and parts of a medieval fortress and the layouts of mines. Although you can, if that helps you. You don't need to get deep into the terminology because your players won't necessarily know that terminology unless you're playing with a very specific group. And so using jargon and very niche terms will confuse them as opposed to provide them with a detailed description. So we can stay a little bit loose with this, but if you are, kind of shrugging your shoulder and going, I don't really know what's in a fortress or a mine, you can do some Googling on that and just kind of take what you like. But for here, we're going to kind of freeform for a minute and see what we get. So we have our key locations, and the following are locations keyed to the map. And as we mentioned last time, the map actually comes in the middle, so we're kind of conjuring this map as we go. And I work, again, in a very kind of loose way. We'll just put stuff down as we think of it, and then we'll reorder it later. It's another reason I like working in Notion here is I can kind of drag and drop things where I need them. So instead of giving these places numbers that we can key to locations I'm at for right now, I'm just going to give them just, little £, hashtag, number symbol, and period, so I can fill that in later and come up with a name. So let's see here. So we need the entry ramp. Let's, entry ramp to the mine. So I'm thinking about like when you're coming up to the entrance of a fortress or moving into a mine, there's all these kind of switchbacking roads that lead up to the actual gatehouse itself, right? And in a fortress, that's there for defense, so that if there's an approaching army, they got to zigzag and spend a lot of time climbing up to the gatehouse, where defenders can pelt them with arrows and what have you. And in a mine, that's really just about allowing goods to have an easier path up and down in and out of the mine. We're thinking mules hauling carts, oxen, that kind of thing. Climbing at a 45-degree angle is not fun for them. So these switchbacks make that easier. on the wagons and the beasts of burden. Cool. So we have an entry ramp, and we'll fill more information out on that later. And then we have our gatehouse. Definitely need those. TBD. Okay. Now, let's see. Oop. Heading. And I could probably make this go faster for myself by copy and pasting. All right. Let's see. Location. We'll just type that out. Copy that. And we'll fill this in. So let's say it's fortress. It needs a great hall. Place to receive people. TBD. Actually, probably be better if I copy and pasted all of that, but we'll fix that in a second here. So let's paste, and we'll say, let's see here. It also needs a dining hall, place to entertain people. TBD. It's going to need garrison for troops. And then we're kind of thinking fortress here at the moment. It's going to need noble chambers, TBD, and we say noble chambers. This may, perhaps this isn't a aristocratic society. Perhaps this is a more egalitarian society. Maybe this is democracy, and then we can fix that later. That could be, the foreman's chambers or something along those lines. But just something to suggest to us the hierarchy there, that this is the rooms of a special individual in here, as opposed to the garrison. Let's see here. Okay, let's think about the mine. We need the mine slope entrance. I say slope here. Let's see. It didn't like me using the slash entrance. Okay, cool. That's gonna annoy the absolute crap out of me. All right. All right. So mine slope entrance. So there's got to be the entry into the mine, and I say mine slope here because I'm thinking of the mouth of a mine, and it gradually works its way down. But we might play with the idea of this being a mine shaft, actually. So there being some sort of like ancient elevator structure. That'd be kind of cool, separating the sort of the two layers of this place from each other. I will also caution you that at this level, at least for me, it is very easy to just go wide and far afield. I have been known to go, I'm just going to make a quick dungeon and, carve out a place with 40 different rooms. And then I have to spend time populating those rooms, and our adventurers aren't going to get to most of them. So we're going to put all this stuff in here, and then we'll hack away at it or add to it later as needed. All right, so we got to run slope, and then we have the actual places where we are mining our cold iron. So we'll say the mine tunnels themselves, TBD, and that's a cool monster environment. I love putting things that hunt characters in mine tunnels, because if you actually look at like a modern mine tunnel map, it's almost like a grid where you have all these parallel roads that cut through, and they have these shafts that connect them horizontally, and so you end up with these big thick pillars. But it's dark and ominous, and there's all kinds of places to hide and sneak around and move about. If your players have to spend, or your characters have to spend any amount of time in there, it can be uber scary to have something that they realize is in there with them that they can't see, but that is hunting them. So let's make a little note to myself. Something hunting the characters? Question mark? Could be fun. could be fun to hunt your characters for sport. Okay. So working down in the mine, we'd need, ore processing. So we need a place that they refine and the crude ore down into just the cold iron mineral that we're looking for. Um, and then we could have a place, we could have a forge either down there or up above somewhere where they craft this into usable stuff. We need a place for. What did I just do? Okay. Copy. All right. Yeah. So we need a place for them to store the ore or storage because they'll produce it faster than they will craft with it. And then they're going to need a place to store, let's see here, equipment, stores. What am I doing? What am I doing here? All right. That's all right. Okay. Okay, so equipment stores, so hashtag. Let's see here. That speaking of storage, I also need a pantry. TBD. Let's try this again. Control copy. Control paste. All right, and that means a kitchen. They'll need that upstairs, maybe even downstairs. We might down in the mine. We might have multiple, or maybe there's for the workers in the mine while they're working during that day. There's maybe there's a miners mess hall, so a place for them to work that's not the formal to eat, where that's not the formal dining room or the garrison. They're all dirty. I guess I don't know that you would get as dirty with mining cold iron in a tunnel of ice. Anyway, we'll think about it. Okay, so then need that. We probably need. Well, there's a certain amount of business that's going on here. We might need offices or a throne room if this is a. We'll call this a throne room for the moment. We'll call it something. We'll call it a throne room. And if it's if this does turns out to be an aristocratic society originally, then we'll use it as a throne room. Otherwise, we'll chop it up and it'll be, offices and conference rooms and yada yada yada. We'll let the map help inform us on this. And so this is a pretty good list of stuff that we would need for this, at least to get started. We should also, this is probably a good list for us to get started. I will say that something that I almost never see in dungeons that I really like to toss in, and it's really just for me, is the privy. So that's the washroom, the toilets. One, because it adds a level of realism for the players. They wander through these places, they open a door, and it's the bathroom. Okay, those things exist in places that are built for habitation. But also too, I personally I think it's a fun place to drop either boons or banes. So like things that have been dropped or left in the bathroom, the players to find might be a reward of some kind or clues, that kind of stuff. But also toilets are just a fun place to hide like oozes and uncomfortable things that come to attack your characters, ghosts. If you want to lean into the horde of Harry Potter bit there, I mean, Mooning Myrtle hung out in a bathroom for a reason, right? So we've got a whole bunch of places to work through here, and we can start kind of sketching out our ideas for what goes where in each of these. Again, kind of jumping around on this. And so once we've kind of got some thoughts for all of these things, and we've added stuff that occurs to us, and we've removed stuff that just doesn't fit for any particular reason, or some particular reason, then we'll work on drawing out the map, and then that will lead to a new round of revisions on this as we eliminate or add spaces, depending on sort of how things fit together in the map for us. And we'll do the map in a different stream at some point. So let's go ahead and jump into what we already have ideas for. So let's see here. There's one thing that we need, because we've got stuff that would be made here, stuff that wouldn't have left with the people who fled, and we need some sort of treasury, a place where they keep the very high quality things they make and the wealth that they amass, and gives us a good place to dump a nice bit of coin in here for our characters. Okay, so as we're moving through this, we're going to start thinking about encounters and what sorts of creatures that our players might engage with. And so, if you haven't already at this stage, it's a good time to sit down and go, okay, what level am I making this for? I like the idea of doing this as a adventure for third level characters. And so I generally balance mine. If I don't know who they're going to be for, I'll say it's 4 characters of whatever level, right? So in this case, we'll do 4 third level characters for this adventure. And just to make sure that I don't get twisted on that later, we're going to say balanced for 4 characters of third level, because I will forget if I don't write it down. Cool. But you can do whatever you like. I've run campaigns that have 6, 7 characters in them. And so we'll do that many characters of whatever level they're at. So just work with whatever you need. So with that in mind, I think, looking at all of this, I want to start with our mine tunnels. I think I've got the clearest idea of what that might look like, or what I would want it to look like. Actually, I take that back. Let's go to ore storage, because this is our objective. This is what we want the players to get to, because this is where the cold iron is going to be, right? This is where they need to recover what they're going to recover. So let's make a note here that this room houses the cold iron. And I like to hyperlink that to the rest in here so that later it's easy for me to find what I'm looking for. Okay, how's the cold iron? So we'll have to think about what later on, how much cold iron there is, how much it weighs, how much space it takes up, and then figure out ways for our players to get that back. This is a mine. They were clearly moving a large amount of product, so we can just, at this point, safely assume that passages are wide enough for carts and wagons or that kind of deal, and there's suitable access points for the kinds of beasts of burden that would be required to pull those, or there are mechanisms built in that allow the movement of those heavy loads. So we don't have to worry about that too much at the moment. So instead, let's start with what we know. So we've got something hunting the characters down in the mine tunnels. Cool, I like that. But let's add a little more to this. So let's say that I'm just going to kind of free-form this. Patches of infectious gas, and at some point we're going to need a pithier name for that. Let's see here. bloom throughout the network of tunnels, creating areas of infection. Cool. You know, and areas of infection. And so now we've kind of got something that we can work with when we go to map this. And that sort of thing. So things like little barriers like that, like our infectious gas, or perhaps collapses, where this is an old mine, places where it's crumbled down and passages have been blocked. Take a very regular grid, very symmetrical grid, and add some asymmetry to it. Asymmetry is beautiful when we are designing dungeons in particular, because it keeps your players from being able to predict what comes next. So, to that end, let's say some places have collapsed over the years, making them impassable. Cool. So we got that. And then, let's think about what might be down here. What might be ominous here? For that, I like to come over to my handy dandy D&D Beyond, and I'll be honest, I'm a big fan for this kind of thing going over to the encounter builder, and either using that and setting up a group of, hey, look at that, there's my default level 1 guys. I might just say, level 1 characters, and we'll bump these guys up to level 3. But either come over to the encounter builder here and looking, sort of playing around with balancing, not necessarily by monster, but by challenge rating, to kind of see where the rails are on this kind of thing. Or I will open up Xanathars and go with the guide in there to kind of give myself some rails too. Lately, I've been doing more with Xanathars. I just think it does a slightly more difficult challenge. So let's take a look here. Let's go Xanathars and encounter building. And I will save you reading the whole thing. Effectively, it's a ratio, right? Third level characters, and kind of gives us, one third level character can take on 5, 1/8 challenge rating monsters, or they're balanced for a 1-to-1 for a 1/2. And this assumes a battle of moderate difficulty, where it's not an easy fight, but it's not one that's likely going to wipe the floor with them. If you wanted to wipe the floor with them, you added in 2 extra characters effectively, right? And this is if you're doing multiple monsters, right? So if we've got 4 third level characters, a moderate level fight would be 4 1/4 level creatures. A difficult fight, potentially deadly fight, would be a 6 of them. For one creature, we can extrapolate that by saying, hey, 2 would be challenge rating 2 would be moderately difficult, or challenge rating 3 would be perhaps potentially deadly. We can extrapolate that down here, or we can use the chart up here, where we see, our solo potentially deadly. It's 3rd level. I will be honest with you. I try to avoid using single monsters when at all possible, unless they are legendary or mythic or along that variety, because the action economy is going to allow of the action economy of one monster, even with multi-attack, versus 4 characters. They're going to overwhelm it. And that battle is going to go by very quickly, just by the sheer law of numbers, right? So we've got stuff that's hunting our characters. Let's see what our options might be. So we can either come in here and kind of set the bars in our challenge rating and say, Ooh, we want anywhere from 1/2 to challenge rating 3. Kind of work in here. We can pick an environment. We could say, uh, Underdark. We could say Arctic, since we're kind of doing the cold there. Might even say mountain. Whatever works for us here, just to kind of get the vibe. Frequently sort by challenge rating here. I also like this because it'll pull in my homebrew stuff as I'm working on it. Copy of Hobgoblin being just a top tier monster, let me tell you. Okay. So, yeah, we can kind of work through all of this. Sometimes if I am, especially if I'm writing for other people, I will give myself guide rails on this kind of thing. I'll say like I'm only going to use monsters from these source books. One, because then it means that whoever's running this doesn't need as much stuff to run it. But for myself, and if you're writing for yourself, you can use pretty much anything. As we kind of twist our way through this, dark mantles, those could be fun underwater. That's a possibility. And so I will. Yeah, that might be fun. We'll put those over there. I kind of use the encounter summary as my potentials list. Yeah. So dark mantles could be fun. They definitely could be in a mine hunting living things. Orcs, not so much. So many more orcs. Let's see. Our way through this. Nothing's really jumping out at me at the moment here. Demons are fun for that kind of stuff, especially when we're laying into the idea of disease. So maybe we'll look at some demons as a possibility here. See what we've got. Choker. What do we got here? Spider climb. That's fun, especially in an enclosed space like that. That could be cool. Oh, aberrant quickness, extra attack. Ooh, extra action, not just extra attack. That could be cool. All right, so let's add our choker in as a possibility. I can see them hunting in the depths there. Let's see. Load more. Ghouls, always good, especially with a plague kind of deal. I love about ghouls is this ability to perhaps paralyze. It adds a little extra layer of gut wrench when players encounter them. So that could be fun. Let's consider them as a possibility. Unless we're making this place inhabited, I would stay away from stuff like Durgar or Kobolds. And I don't like the idea of this being inhabited. It could work for you. It certainly works in other settings. Things like the Sunless Citadel does a really great job at taking an old ruin and having goblins and kobolds that have moved into it and creating a hierarchy and some cool politics in that. So it's certainly feasible. There's nothing wrong with doing it. Let's see here. Boom. Ooh, you know what could be good? And it's not on, I'm not seeing on here, so let's look it up. Let's consider troglodytes. Trogs. Because I'll never spell troglodyte right. It's probably down over here. Nope, it's going to be on the third one. Let's see. Yeah, troglodyte. Okay, so they're 1/4. Interesting. So they're perhaps maybe a little underpowered. If we got to something like this and we thought, we want really like the idea of a troglodyte, but they're not quite enough. We could always, modify the monster to meet our needs. Um, I don't know that I want to work that hard at the moment, so perhaps not them. Um, I think I think of all of these, I like the idea of the ghouls per se. So let's see how that would scale out here. So 2 to 1. So we'd be looking at 3 ghouls potentially against 4 adventurers. That's not bad. That's not bad. Now I'm kind of scaling this as a deadly encounter, um, because there needs to be a fear of death, and there's a lot of resources that our our creatures or our characters could use here to try to evade these dangers, especially if it's a wide open space. So let's let's hit our ghoul here. Let's take a look. Because I also can consider them being perhaps immune to the disease that's down here, that infectious gas. And so they have a little more freedom of passage down in these parts. And these could be, the remnants of the miners that didn't get out. So it's kind of cool narratively. All right, so let's go with that. And so we said 3 ghouls for a tough adventure, for a tough encounter here. So let's say um, encounter. Let's see here. Hard to deadly. 3, and I still bold the creatures that I'm using here. 3 ghouls. Immune to disease. Hunt the characters throughout the tunnels. And let's actually say 3 hungry ghouls. I say we add that on here not because we need to know that ghouls are necessarily hungry, but giving our monsters objectives um, is really useful because it's easy to um, kind of forget that the fight is a means to an end. Combat is a means to an end for everybody in this game, for the characters, for NPCs, for monsters. They're using it to achieve a particular outcome or a particular objective. And so in this case, by us identifying these ghouls are hungry, they want to eat our characters. Well, we, it now implies certain tactics, hunter's tactics, ambush tactics. It also means the ghouls are likely to fall back and retreat when they are wounded, only to come back later to continue hounding and attacking the party when they least expect it, or whenever they let their guard down or separate, that kind of thing. Cool. One other thing I'll do too here is I'll come up to the top, which you can't see the URL here, but I'll copy that for any monsters I add this, and I'll hyperlink that in just so that when I'm actually running this, it becomes so much easier to go, okay, ghoul encounter, click on that, and then it opens up, it takes me to the ghoul stat block on there, which is useful even if I'm running a virtual tabletop. Cool. Okay, so now we kind of have that built here, we can remove this and we can give ourselves kind of a line of description or two in here. We could say the mine tunnels are a regular network of intersecting passages deep in the glacier. They are unlit and full of places to hide. Excellent. Cool. Comma there. Cool. All right. Excellent. So that gives us one of our little rooms down here. If there's a place that's significant to you in your story, you can put a little block for call out for text that you'll read aloud to your characters, and I will do that sometimes, but I generally reserve that for places that are rooms that are need a very particular presentation. So I'm setting the stage for something, a puzzle, or hinting that there might be a trap, or um, or forecasting an encounter or something along those lines. I'll put that text in there so I don't forget. But for a space like this, I can leave that in here. Sometimes one thing I might do for myself, if I'm writing a particular encounter that I know I want to play out a certain way, I might make a note about tactics that the creatures use, and we'll say tactics, ambush, and fade is what I'll put in here. Pick off weakest of group. Cool. And just kind of give myself a note or two there, just so that when I run this, I know how I want to play this. Cool. Okay, so we've got our mine tunnels here. Let's see what else jumps out at us. Gatehouse is a pretty simple thing. Let's say the gatehouse is the entry to the, we'll say is the main entry to the, let's say fortress level of the glacier mine. Okay. It overlooks the entry ramp. We'll say area numero, just to give myself a reference point there, with arrow slits and guard posts. There is a passage above above where the road meets the door. Road meets the main gate, we'll say. Should be is a passage. We'll say here, grates in the floor allow defenders to pour boiling oil down on attackers. Cool. So a little detail there. We could put defenders here if we want. Maybe I'll say undead defenders still at their posts. Maybe. Let's see what kind of vibe we want for this. We might put that in there. Just got that there. Let's go back down to cold storage here for our last couple minutes as we work through this. So cold storage is kind of our, I'm sorry, not cold storage, our cold iron storage, our ore storage. So let's actually change this to cold iron storage. And is our objective. This is what our players are trying to get to, which means that it needs to be difficult to get to. There should be more than one path to reach it in this dungeon, but it can't be by the front door. It can't be in an accessible place, and it should be challenging to open. In fact, if we said we want to make our dungeon here the puzzle, perhaps it has keyed locks that requires 3 keys that are maybe unpickable, magically protected, what have you. So let's say here, this room has the cold iron. The door is locked by 3 keys. The locks are magically warded against picking. 3 keys are hidden we'll say hidden, but they'd really be kind of like laying and forgotten, hidden throughout the fortress and mine. So kind of maybe gives our characters something to hunt around for, a reason to explore this place. Because that's one thing. If you're gonna spend time building out a dungeon like this, and as you can see, this is gonna take us a little time to do. Um, you don't want to do that if they're not going to, explore it. Cool. All right. So thank you everybody for joining me on this session of turning off my alarm on my phone for this session of Let's Write an Adventure. If you've been enjoying this series or any of my videos, please hit the like button, smash subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss any other videos. My adventure Plague Breakers is now up live on the DMs Guild, and you can check that out at the link that I will put in the video description here. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you next week.